Hello, everyone. This is the July 10th edition of the SIG Azure meeting. This is a meeting that is recorded and will be available on the internet, so please be mindful of what you say. Please be sure to adhere to the Kubernetes code of conduct and just in general be excellent to each other. All right? So we have a few items on the agenda. And they're primarily focused around what we're doing for the second half of the year, primarily around the external cloud provider, as well as some of the consolidation efforts that we're going to be working on in short order. So I'm going to pop the agenda into the meeting notes, into the Zoom chat. I hope everyone who is on Zoom has updated their Zoom clients.
I have.
Yeah, there was an advisory that went out for people who are on Macs that Zoom has installed a secret web server that does not remove itself and kind of runs forever when if you happen to uninstall Zoom. So that leads to lots of nice, fun security issues. Anyhow, I also don't use a Mac, so I'm fine. So tell you what, I will share my screen. And whoa, many. All right. Well, all right, so on the right-hand side, you can see the agenda and some people's faces. Minimize that. So first off, I want to talk quickly about 116, some of the things that we have planned.
Hey, can we take a quick break? Because there are a couple of folks here I don't know. Maybe we can welcome.
Yeah, sure.
Folks, and I'm taking notes. I just wanted to introduce myself. Craig Peters, I'm a PM at Microsoft. I know most of you, but okay, Alana's at Red Hat, awesome.
Okay, OpenShift Azure.
Fantastic. Awesome. And Brian, nice to meet you. Maybe you could introduce yourself quickly.
Yeah, I'm Bryson Shepard. I'm with Walmart.
Awesome. Oh, hey, Bryson.
Hey, Stephen. I think that was Stephen.
Yeah, it was.
Awesome. Welcome, Bryson, and Alana. Thanks.
I should say hello as well, because I just typed in some notes. I'm on the Azure Red Hat OpenShift team, and have been meaning to come to the SIG meeting for like 2 months and failing to do so. And it looks like from the meeting notes that we don't actually meet bi-weekly, so it's good that I caught this one. I'm also on SIG instrumentation.
Oh, cool.
Fantastic. And are you working in a Microsoft office or in a Red Hat office? Or?
No, I work remotely from home.
Okay, cool. Well, welcome to the group, both Bryson and Alana. All right. Thanks. Sorry, Stephen. I just wanted to make sure we all.
No, that's perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, so I don't know, maybe we should let Cecile, Rita, and Matt introduce themselves quickly so Alana and Bryson know who they are.
Yes, go for it.
Cecile.
Yeah, hi. I'm Cecile. I work at Microsoft. Been there for 2 years. I work from Seattle. Previously was in Vancouver, Canada. And you'll see me a lot around AKS Engine and getting more involved in Cluster API recently.
Awesome. Rita?
Hey, I'm Rita. I'm an engineer at Microsoft, based out of San Francisco Bay Area. Most recently been very involved with Gatekeeper project, policy, and SIG Auth. So,
Matt.
I'm Matt Boersma. I work with Cecile directly and Rita, and I worked on AKS, the service, and now AKS Engine, the open source project. And I feel like I spend most of my time trying to keep upstream Kubernetes from breaking us.
I'm actually curious about that. So
I thought
yeah,
you might be. Yeah.
yeah. Tell you what, let's put an agenda item ahead of this, so you can talk about that a little bit.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, go for it.
Well, we have breakage right now. I'm still trying to swim upstream, so I should have been aware of this, but unfortunately, people told me about it. It boils down to we made a change so that now we require app/v1, not v1 beta. And so we had to, for some deployments and daemon sets, we had to catch up with that change. I didn't realize that the selector was no longer implicit, so we had to catch up with that change. That hasn't been merged yet, so I know that's one point of breakage, but that should be fixed. What else? The main thing is, sorry.
This was a 116. This was a 116.
That was a 116 behavior. I mean, I guess the overall issue is we're integrating master with AKS engine master, and so some breakage like this is not surprising. The other big thing, oh boy.
Sorry, it's actually not the latest AKS engine. It's the latest release. So not master, just to clarify, right?
That's true. The other big issue for us is, a lot of labels under Kubernetes.io are no longer allowed and are causing problems. And we've been using those for a while by convention, kind of the same way kubeadm does. So we thought, that was legit. Turns out they're causing errors now, and we're kind of scrambling to find a fix for that because it seems like just not using the labels isn't going to be adequate for us given how deeply we're using them incorrectly. The intent is that we're not supposed to be using labels for scheduling like this, but anyway, so those are 2 points of breakage. I think there's also something with a metric server that just cropped up that Peng Fei pointed out that I don't really have a handle on. But probably the labels is the thing that's creating the job for most of us, so I'm trying to fix that now.
Okay, so on my end, I'm working on, what is this? Okay, oh, no, sorry. So I'm working on an update to Azure SDK for Kubernetes, and as you can see, lots of test failures, fun. And also lots of files changed, right? So something that we need to be aware of is that so this is to let's see, to Azure SDK for Go version load, don't load. Okay. All right. Okay, cool. GitHub. Never mind. Let's see if I put it in the notes. Okay, page is frozen. Super. Anyhow, there were changes to Azure SDK for Go as well as Go auto rest. I believe in 11.4 something maybe of Go auto rest, they introduced a dependency for our new dependency for Open Census Proto, and that has basically like torn us up, right? I don't think that we are able to update our SDKs right now for either Cluster API for Azure or Kubernetes, right? Because essentially what happens is that Open Census Proto update leads to a protobuf bump, which is a protobuf bump for the entire project, right? So I filed, and man, thing is totally broken now. I filed an issue in Go auto rest saying that I need to gather more data, but essentially like we're locked to versions right now, right? Which is bad because we're locked to much older versions of the Azure SDK than we need to be. In fact, I think the last bump that we did was a bump for the network API version, which was stuck back in, I think, like 2007-08-01 or something, right? So we're like, ooh, maybe not great. Maybe we should update that, right? What that led to was a bunch of changes in Kubernetes, probably multiple 100K lines of code changes. So the project overall is not happy with us because we introduce huge bumps. So overall, we're looking for the timeline to move out of tree, right? Or at least in addition to that, also having more of a feedback loop between Microsoft and the project around when things like this change, right? We're probably, probably one of the larger consumers of the Azure SDK for Go. So I think it's important that our feedback gets back into the development process on the Microsoft side.
Do you have any insight into, or does anybody on this call have any insight into who at Microsoft works on the Azure SDK for Go?
So I think the more important one is the Go Autorest one. So the Go Autorest one. So the Azure SDK for Go imports Go Autorest, and Go Autorest. I'm trying to pull up who is on that issue currently.
Yeah. The only data point I have is we're still using dep in the AKS engine project, but we just bumped Go Autorest the same way a couple days ago, and it caused some funkiness as well. So
yeah,
they did something weird in Go Autorest. They shouldn't have done that.
And it was not recent. It was actually not recent. It's been broken for a while, or broken, right? I'm just trying to pull up the issue that I opened.
So Joel Hendricks.
Yes, I think that's one of the people.
I think they just fixed the exponential backoff thing that was blocking a couple of folks.
Say, if somebody could paste the link, the issue into the notes, maybe I can chase some of this down internally.
Yeah, let
What, if
me.
anything, can be done?
Yeah, found it. Okay, here we go.
So, Stephen, I think all the agenda stuff that you put in there is awesome. We'll probably end up working on a lot of that asynchronously.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. All right. Okay. Not pasting. What is happening? All right. I'm having computer issues today.
Yeah, it's because you're not using a Mac.
Sick burn. All right. So we'll move into, so that's something to kind of track for the long term. I think that if we can fix it on the Microsoft side, that's probably more advantageous because what it's sounding like to me, at least, is that we're going to be stuck in tree for a little bit until they detangle some other blockers. So there are some blockers around. So again, now we're shifting into the Kubernetes 1.16 work. So we have three things on the plate for 1.16. Azure availability sets will be going GA, as well as cross-region, cross-resource group nodes going GA. So just buffering up some of the testing on that stuff, making sure everything is good to go. This should be lightweight graduation for those two. The bigger one is tracking for the out-of-tree cloud controller manager. So that is still in beta. Some of the things that are blocking us right now around that is there's an API throttling issue. So when node initialization happens, especially for larger clusters, it would be nice to have some protections around how we submit those to the Kubernetes APIs. So I don't know. I will speak very vaguely about that because I don't know the entirety of the problem, but it is linked in that blocker section that's in the agenda. There's also the credentials provider, which I think is should be a lot simpler to do. And we're going to kind of action on that, if I'm correct, Rita, for 116.
Yes, this is to basically not use Azure JSON, right?
Yes, yeah, I think there's like a -- external cloud provider or external container registry, something flag that would need to be pulled out, which I think we have all the pieces in place that we need to do now. And then finally, the CSI, the volume plugin. So Azure File and Azure Disk have CSI plugins. There are still some intertangled bits in the Kubernetes code that has to deal with the Intri cloud provider, the Intri volume plugins. So those are still wired up. So for us to for the Intri cloud provider to use the CSI plugins, we have to untangle some of that stuff. I don't know what the exact progress is on that, but I did ping Fei, and I think we chatted a few days ago about some of this. So he's going to provide updates within probably a week. So moving on. So any questions about some of that stuff? Any things that we need to prioritize that weren't mentioned for 116? All right.
Based on my discussions with Pengfei, that's the right stuff.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, and he recently sweeped all of the issues. There are a few more issues for tracking within the Kubernetes SIG's cloud provider Azure repo, so you can feel free to check them out there as well. All right. So the big task that's coming up is so this is more administrivia for myself and Craig and Cal and Bing Fei, that SIG Azure will be folding under SIG Cloud Provider as a sub-project, right? So I mocked up a quick like phase 0, what that looks like. The deadline for us moving under cloud provider is July 12th. So if anyone is working on KubeCon proposals as well, it's been a fun week. So this is a general kind of plan of what we want to do.
Okay, so I just got back. Are there specific things that you just want to hand off to me that I can run with?
Some of these phase 0 things are going to be like quick repo PRs, so I can handle. Shouldn't be too bad. The last few weeks we've had like release engineering stability issues for Kubernetes, so I've been working on stabilizing that stuff. So lots of failing tests, lots of things with like our push and build process. So that's cleaned up. So now I'm kind of like freer to work on the Azure stuff. But essentially, we want to make sure that people who come into SIG Azure are interested in joining these meetings and participating in general, they know where to go, right? So the first place they would check is Kubernetes community, right? So small cosmetic changes there, basically putting up a banner saying that we're moving from, we are no longer SIG Azure, we are now the Azure, our provider Azure subproject of SIG Cloud Provider. Also making sure that we migrate the owners and the projects and subprojects that are listed in the Azure landing page over to the cloud providers page. From there, there are also Azure teams, GitHub teams that are defined within our Parabolus config on Kubernetes org. So Parabolus is this tool that we use across Kubernetes to essentially manage the config of the GitHub orgs, right? So that includes users, teams. I was just throwing out some term that no one's heard of, right? So that's users, teams, the permissions that the teams have, what you can do on the org level, if you can create project boards, different things like that. All of that is contained in a set of YAML configs in Kubernetes org, right? So we're going to make sure that we have a subdirectory within that includes the Azure teams. From there, we'll need to rename some of the teams from SIG Azure blah to provider Azure blah, right? And then in terms of org level sweeping, making sure that I want to use the time to be able to audit the owners files that we currently have across the different Azure subprojects. So making sure that now that we're shifting from a SIG to a subproject, the governance model changes a little bit, right? So so the chairs and technical leads will become sub-project owners, right? So sub-project owners are supposed to have, sub-projects basically dictate ownership of code, right? So as such, we should make sure that the SIG chairs and technical leads are owners of all the code. I think that's mostly true today, but this is just like a sanity check, right? That will also give us an opportunity to find the people who are actively working on the code and promote them as necessary to reviewers or approvers, right? So Rita, you may be in some of the files, but not all of the files, or you may not have approval rights on some of the things, and it's probably time to fix that, right? And then also, so a note on the on Cluster API Azure. Cluster API Azure would become a subproject of SIG Cluster Lifecycle, not SIG Cloud Provider, right? So SIG Cluster Lifecycle owns all of the Cluster API things. We've essentially split ownership with them. They've been like secondary owner during this kind of like stand-up time for Cluster API Azure. But now that we're shifting over to subproject, it makes sense to shift that into their governance model as well. So there are a bunch of things I haven't quite figured out about this, because I think this is the first time that the Kubernetes community is actually doing this. We're like migrating subprojects, spinning down a SIG, and and all of the cruft that's involved in like cleaning up mailing lists and making sure owners are in certain places, and then like little things like, so I'm calling all of the previous stuff phase 0, right? So phase 0, like let's hit all of the critical points, which I think covering the owner's files and making sure people know where to go is the first step. From there, hitting more of the user-facing changes. So there will be a repo rename from Kubernetes Cloud Provider Azure to Kubernetes SIG's Cloud Provider Azure, right? So I think I've kind of poked around a little, and I think that should be okay. In terms of the Go imports, when we import SIG, when we import Kates.io, we have, there is a Kubernetes Kates.io repo that serves the configs for an Nginx server that does a bunch of rewrites for vanity URLs, right? So Kates.io rewrites to Kubernetes.io, and then within Kubernetes.io, there are rewrites for like, if this thing looks like a Git repo, then change this from this, change this to this, and then there are also rewrites for Go imports, right? So that part should be handled, and then the second part of that is also how do links change, right? So if you're aware that when you change a repo in GitHub, as long as you only change it once, it will keep a redirect around from the old repo to the new, right? So between the vanity URLs that we have set up for Kubernetes and the redirects that we have for imports, the vanity URLs that we have in Kubernetes for for Kates.io and sig.kates.io, as well as the GitHub automatic redirect, we should be fine there, right? I'm not super concerned. It is something I would want to do sooner rather than later, so that we can start to identify any breakages. But I don't imagine any impact, especially because we're still kind of in the split brain scenario between in-tree and out-of-tree cloud provider, right? There are
would this impact the proud jobs? Probably.
Potentially, but it shouldn't be too bad. We can identify. There's Hound, so cs.kates.io, which allows you to do a regex search of the code across Kubernetes orgs, right? And we can just search for the repo before we change it, right?
For some of this, I'm not following upstream super closely on this stuff, but I know it's coming for the moving the like Azure and other cloud provider stuff out of tree. Do you know what release that's targeted for? Is that 117? The future?
The future, yeah, that's kind of the answer right now. So it's supposed to be At some point, I think it was 116. I think right now it's 118. Based on the blockers that we have right now, I don't know. I don't know when that's actually going to happen. I think that API throttling issue needs to be solved first until they can start to untangle some of that stuff. The credential provider, once that happens, that should be smooth, easy going, tentatively, hopefully. And then the CSI driver stuff is already in process. So I think within 2 cycles, those 2 will be solved. The API throttling one will probably be the harder one.
Do you have any sense of where the other cloud providers are right now?
No, but I can sync up with Andrew. There actually is a SIG cloud provider meeting later today. There
are things we can learn from how things are going there.
Yeah, it's 4 p.m. It's 4 p.m. Eastern, so 1 p.m. on Pacific. If you're available for that.
I'll be there.
Okay. I may or may not be able to attend, so having coverage there would be great.
I will.
There are, and then little things like channel renames. So we're going from SIG Azure to Provider Azure on Slack. Mailing list renames. It will be, I don't know, do we get rid of our mailing list or do we? Probably not. It is incredibly low traffic. I think it is usually just me sending out an email saying that the meeting's canceled. But we should probably keep a mailing list around for contact. So probably Kubernetes Provider Azure will be the nomenclature. Proud job impacts are something to look at. And then from there, literally everything else, things that we haven't caught in these first 2 sweeps. So things to consider are like the update for KubeCon, right? So the updates for the sessions. So instead of having an intro and deep dive session, we will be allowed to have 1 session. I think Craig and I can talk about too, or what we want to talk about for November. The community updates, I think what we landed on was having a combined community update, right? So usually what happens is 3 SIGs will do their updates for that week. I think what we can end up doing is when the SIG cloud provider update happens, we all pile on, right? Every cloud provider will have a section, and that will be the only SIG that does the update for that week. I think that's what the plan was, but I can clarify with Andrew later. And then outside of that, I don't know. There's some things I probably haven't thought of yet, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to them. So we are 1 minute past but I want to point out that, the SIG Azure second half planning doc explains some of the stuff that I just talked about. So you can take a look at that. And so I think once we nail down some of the stuff, we need to circle back and talk about the meeting time, because this is a lowly attended meeting. It is nice to see Microsoft faces pretty consistently, and a red hat face now. But this is it's not a well attended meeting, and also some of the technical talent that we have, like Peng Fei and Andy, are in time zones where this is not convenient, right? So we need to consider a split meeting or our alternating schedules between APAC friendly and PT friendly, but we'll figure it out. And I think once we move a little further along in some of the stuff that's listed in phase 0 and phase 1, we can swing back and talk about the meeting.
Yeah, I'd say something on the meeting is just knowing that it's going to happen. I know there's been some times where I joined and didn't realize it was canceled. So
yeah, so we try our best to let people know when the meetings are canceled, shoot out a quick email or something. But I think between the last few months have been KubeCon, release breakages, release team cuts, things like that that have stolen attention. I think Craig was also, we were at at Barcelona and Shanghai. So kind of lack of availability over the last few months. So apologies. We will be more present about that.
Definitely.
All right. So any questions, comments, concerns, things I didn't cover before we go? All right. Well, good to see you all. Have a great day.
Okay, bye.
Wow.